أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المأسومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you again for joining us on this Tuesday night and an opportunity to talk about the Ahlul Bayt. I know with a bit of a hiatus, we're continuing our conversation around our second Imam, Imam Hasan ibn Ali al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And we had mentioned about the earlier portion of his life that he spent with the Holy Prophet. Our second Imam's life is for a period of about 47 years. The first 7 that were spent with his grandfather Rasulullah, the next 30 that were spent with his father, and the final 10 years of his life that he spent as the Imam. The period of time that coincides after the Shahadat of the Prophet and the authority of Imam Ali, this is a 30-year period that, while officially we don't see much out of the Ahlul Bayt or the Banu Hashim. And the reason for this is, again, that there was the authority of the Khulafa didn't extend to the Ahlul Bayt in the sense that the Ahlul Bayt agreed with the decisions that were making, or that they followed the instruction that was given to them. So which is why during this period of 30 years, or approximately 25 years that the first 3 Khulafa operate, there isn't much that's heard about the lives of the Ahlul Bayt in this time period. As a matter of fact, some reports actually go out and say that, oh, Imam Hassan participated in the Futuhat, in the battles and the expansion battles of Islam into different regions and places. However, we don't find any authentic sources or agreement between the variety of different sources about this fact. And therefore, we assume that it's a way of creating tacit approval for the actions of the Khulafa, as opposed to talking about actual history. So even amongst various historians, there's no agreement that they did participate, they didn't participate, how was their participation? None of this is really documented. There are a few things that we do know about this time period of the first 25 years of this time period, in which we see that Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain were teachers about the religion of Islam, and they spent their time educating society about the religion, and were well-respected scholars of the religion of Islam, and well-respected for their piety. For example, one of the discussions that goes on that in the life of Imam Hassan, he did over 25 Hajj walking to the Kaaba from Medina. Now, this description of walking to the Kaaba and walking to Mecca from Medina to go perform Hajj was both a show of the dedication that the Imam had, his efforts to exert as much of his energy in the way of Allah, and that it wasn't enough that he just fulfilled his wajibat, but also that he showed his extra sincerity in his effort. Along with this, we talk about the generosity of Imam Hassan, which was well known as well too. It's famously said that Imam Hassan in his life over 2 times gave away exactly half of his wealth. Everything that he had, he would partition exactly half and dedicate it to Allah directly, to the extent where they would describe that if he had a pair of shoes, one of the shoes would be given away in charity to show that his love and dedication to the cause of Allah. There are other elements and discussions that talk about his show of character and behavior and demonstration of good behavior with people in society to promote good characteristics. But in spite of all of this, the Banu Umayyah did not spare the character of Imam Hassan, which is why very famously there is a discussion that says that Imam Ali issued a hadith about his son, where he told people that do not marry your daughters to my son Hassan, لأنهم مطلاق, or كثير الطلاق. Mitlaq is someone who does a lot of divorce, that my son divorces a lot, so don't marry your daughters to him. We don't agree with this hadith, and that Imam Ali would say this about Imam Hassan. And again, Imam Ali saying this about his son would mean that it happened in this 25-year period or 30-year period. But there are narrations that people say that Imam Hassan used to get married quite a lot and get divorced quite a lot. We don't believe any of this. And the reason for that is think of it this way, that if Imam Hassan is an Imam is supposed to be a guide for humanity. Whatever the Imam does is supposed to be good for society and an example to follow. How could he be the Imam if Imam Ali is the one instigating him and telling us that he's not a reliable person to marry? He's not a good person to marry your daughters to because he does divorce a lot. So what we say is that this was a fabrication that was made to slander the character of the Imam and to reduce his status in society. But the initiation of this hadith doesn't take place in this 25-year period. Rather, in this 25-year period, one of the attributes of the Ahlul Bayt was that as long as they were in a position there was an Imam present, the other Ahlul Bayt supported the Imam, but they didn't speak up against or for or make their character as publicly embellished as it could have been. Let me explain. At the end of the 25 years, the final 5 years of Imam Ali's life, where he takes the Khilafat himself for 4 years and 9 months and some days, during this time, we do see some more narrations about Imam Hassan and his time, that he moves to the city of Kufa with his father when the capital is moved to Kufa. And Imam Hassan then is the one who rallies the armies from Kufa to support Imam Ali in the city of Basra. The Battle of Jamal actually has a very interesting story associated with it about Imam Hassan. That in the Battle of Jamal, Jamal meaning camel, that the camel was the main figure in the opposition army against Imam Ali. And in most battles, what would happen is every army has a flag bearer, but in the Battle of Jamal, there wasn't a flag, there was a camel. And Imam Ali explained, he says, as long as that camel stands, this army will continue to fight. If that camel dies or is killed, this army will collapse. So what he did was he sent first Muhammad Hanafiya, his son, to go and kill the camel. And if the camel gets killed, the battle will end. So Muhammad Hanafiya goes, but what he does is he finds that to protect the camel, the army had made circles around the camel to create a protective barrier to prevent anyone from being able to attack the camel. So Imam Ali gave Muhammad Hanafiya a spear, and he said, Muhammad, use this spear, go kill that camel and end the battle. And Muhammad Hanafiya was a valiant warrior. He was very well known for his bravery. Muhammad Hanafiya went and went and went, and he fought as much as he could, and he fought as hard as he could, but he couldn't break all the circles around the camel that were protecting the camel. And instead, he was turned back, and he came back to his father defeated. And Imam Ali takes the spear from Muhammad Hanafiya, and he hands it to Imam Hassan, and he says, you go and you do it. And where Muhammad Hanafiya failed to break the security, where Muhammad Hanafiya failed in the battlefield to defeat the camel, Imam Hassan cut through all of the security, cut through all of the protection, and was the one who killed the camel that was the flag of that army, and dropped the camel, and brought back the spear that was covered in the blood of the camel, showing that he's the one who used this spear to go and end the army and end the attack of the army. Famously, what happens is Muhammad Hanafiya becomes sad that he couldn't do it and Imam Hassan did it. Imam Ali consoles his son. He says, Muhammad, this is the difference between you being my son and Hassan being the son of Rasulullah. While you're brave, you can do many good things, but there's never a comparison between you and the one who is the son of Rasulullah, and shows the status of Imam Hassan and his bravery. That even those who are known for their bravery could not compete with Imam Hassan and his valor. In Kufa, during this 4 years and 9 months, we also see that Imam Hassan was a teacher here as well too. Famously, if you have the opportunity to go to Masjid Kufa, next to Masjid Kufa, they've done a mock-up of what was the house of Imam Ali, and in there is a room that was dedicated to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain, teaching people who would come to learn about the Quran and learn about the religion of Islam. And he continued his role as a teacher in the city of Kufa as well. What we see is at the Shahadat of Imam Ali, Imam Hassan receives the Khilafat, he receives authority, and he also receives the responsibility to face off against Muawiyah. In the life of Imam Ali, he had fought Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin, and after the Battle of Siffin, Muawiyah retreated back to Sham and was raising another army. And Imam Ali, at the end of his life, was preparing the people of Kufa to fight Muawiyah for the final battle, and the people were being lethargic and lazy about it. The proof of this is in Nahj al-Balagha, that if you read the final sermons of Imam Ali, you see him quite angry with the people of Kufa, almost as if he's yelling at them, because they said, we're tired. In 4 years, we fought 3 major wars. We don't want to fight anymore. And Imam Ali is explaining that I need you to stand up for justice. I need you to fight against the enemy. And people were being lazy about it. When Imam Hassan takes the Khilafah and is the successor of Imam Ali, at this point in time, he takes the army that he had raised and he sees that Muawiyah has started to move his army, looking at this as a moment of weakness that he could conquer the city of Kufa. So Muawiyah, as soon as Imam Ali dies, starts moving his army with the intention that now he's going to conquer Kufa while leadership is weak. And in reply, Imam Hassan uh, prepares to meet him in battle. When Imam Hassan prepares to meet him in battle, he sends 10,000 men forward to go stop Muawiyah before they can reach Kufa. And those 10,000 men, who are led by one of his cousins, his cousin commits treachery and joins Muawiyah, and the 10,000 men scatter. And then Imam Hassan takes his force of approximately 20,000 men and proceeds to meet the army of Muawiyah and to stop them. And this is where the famous treaty of Imam Hassan takes place. That Imam Hassan, even though he had 20,000 soldiers, the 10,000 that had deserted him, or the 10,000 that had been scattered, Muawiyah basically does this. He sends a blank piece of paper with his signature on it, and he says, I will accept any terms you give me to give me the Khilafat now so that I don't have to fight you. Imam Hassan famously agrees to a treaty with Muawiyah and abdicates the Khilafat to Muawiyah. Now, the conditions of this treaty are often debated, but there are certain fundamentals that are universally agreed upon in this treaty. And this treaty is very, very important, that if it wasn't for this treaty and the effort that Imam Hassan exists here, the event of Karbala would have been a very different event. And which is why Karbala is not just the actions of Imam Hussain, but it's also the intention and the planning of Imam Hassan that validates this cause. When you study the treaty that Imam Hassan makes with Muawiyah, a variety of different points are mentioned, but there's a few that everybody agrees on. One, that Imam Hassan forbade Muawiyah from the cursing of Imam Ali. Two, that anyone who had fought with Imam Ali and fought against Muawiyah was not allowed to be persecuted or mistreated. Because you would imagine, right, if Muawiyah wins victory and he takes the Khilafat, all the people of Kufa who fought for Imam Ali would be abused. So Imam Hassan sets a condition that you can't abuse anyone who fought for my father or fought for me. You can't abuse anyone who has a differing ideology from you. He also wrote in there that the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet has to be respected and followed. And he also wrote that Muawiyah, upon your death, this Khilafat will turn back to my family. You have no right to appoint a successor. Muawiyah agreed to all of these terms. And famously, when you study the debate about this treaty that Imam Hassan writes, you'll find that there are other clauses that people have, some narrate he asked for, some say don't mention it. For example, some people say that Imam Hassan said that, oh, you have to pay me X amount of money. And the purpose of that money was essentially to say that, oh, Imam Hassan was greedy for wealth, and as long as he had his wealth, he didn't care. Na'uzubillah, that's not true. It's character assassination. Imam Hassan abdicating this was on the intention that, okay, he keeps the mu'mineen together and he saves their life. What happens when he makes this treaty 6 months into his Khilafat and abdicates the Khilafat, the believers who had fought for Imam Ali are very unhappy. That how could you make a treaty with the one that your father fought? And there became this practice where people would actually walk up to Imam Hassan and make the statement, Assalamu alaykum ya mudhill al-mu'mineen. Na'uzubillah, they would go to Imam Hassan and say, Assalamu alaykum, one who disgraced the believers. And at times Imam Hassan would sit with them and explain to them, I didn't disgrace the believers, I saved the believers. And Imam Hassan elaborates. Our fifth Imam, Imam Baqir, explains this about Imam Hassan. He says, there is nothing better on this earth than what my father Imam Hassan did in saving the religion of Islam. That treaty was the best thing for Islam that could have been done on the entire earth because it protected the mu'mineen. Let me explain. Imam Hassan would tell the people, he says, I found you weak. And if you would have fought against this enemy at that moment, he would have overcome you and all of Iman would have been erased from this world. So when I found weakness in you, I protected you and I saved you the same way the Ark of Nuh saved the believers in his time. The analogy that Imam Hassan draws is to say that, for example, when the flood came and the torrents came, those who had faith circled around Nuh, and Nuh, because of the ark that he had created, protected them from the difficulty and the hardship of being destroyed by the water. In the same sense, Imam Hassan is drawing the parable that when Muawiyah brought his army, you think you were ready to fight, but the truth was that you didn't have enough support. And had you fought in that moment, you would have been destroyed and all of the believers would have been wiped out from the face of this earth. What Imam Hassan was pointing to was the truth of what was going on at that time. That in that army that Imam Hassan was taking to face off of Muawiyah, there were those who had been bought off and those who had accepted bribes, and they would have left Imam Hassan. There were also those who were the enemies of Muawiyah as the Khawarij, and they were fighting against Muawiyah because they hated Muawiyah, not because they loved Imam Hassan. And their philosophy was, we either get what we want or we'll kill both of these men. And there were those who were weak in their faith and weak to fight. If that army had gone against Muawiyah in that moment and they would have lost, Imam Hassan would have been killed, all the believers would have been killed, and that no person of faith would have been left. And the ghalaba, the overcoming of disbelief, would have happened and the true signs of Islam would have faded. But Imam Hassan, in sacrificing his khilafat and letting go of the khilafat, but in the consequence, preserving the people of faith and making sure that Muawiyah would be persecuted for touching the people of faith, that Muawiyah, for example, couldn't appoint a successor, that Muawiyah, for example, had no authority to continue and create a legacy because of the treaty that he agreed to and signed that nobody disagrees with. Now, when we look at the field of Karbala and we see Imam Hussain standing against Yazid, Imam Hussain is the right one because Yazid had no right. His father agreed that he wouldn't appoint his successor, and Yazid was the one who was forcefully taking that position of authority. Imam Hussain saving humanity or saving the religion of Islam in Karbala, both are valid statements, was on the precept that no one could argue that Imam Hussain was fighting for power and authority and he was trying to steal back the khilafat, the kingship. The kingship was already his. It was Yazid who was stealing the kingship. It was Yazid who was the oppressor because his father had already agreed that Yazid couldn't be, no one could be, that the khilafat had turned back to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain. And Yazid refused, the family of Banu Umayyah refused to follow the agreement that they had made. And as a consequence of that, the justification of what happens in Karbala is that all of right is with Imam Hussain. And that believers that were there to fight with Imam Hussain, and those 72 that we commemorate, are there because Imam Hassan preserved their lives by not fighting Muawiyah at an earlier time when there was a weakness amongst them. This event marks the initiation of the 10 years of Khilafat of Imam Hassan. That for 10 years that he was the Khalifa, the first thing that happens is this, and he steps away from the position of authority. And some people describe and say that after this incident, he, na'uz billah, fades off in disgrace. That's not true. An imam is an imam. Whether he's the Khalifa or not, he's still the authority of Allah on this earth, the teacher for humanity, and the guide for society. And Imam Hassan enacted guidance throughout his entire life, and his imamat was marked by the system of guidance. There are a few key things that the imam does in this 10-year period. The first thing, after the abdication of the Khilafat, he moves from the city of Kufa back to the city of Medina to be close to the grave of Rasulullah. This action that the imam takes is one of the demonstrations of the importance of Medina itself. That while Kufa is true, it's the city of the believers, and it will be the capital of our 12th imam, that the Ahlul Bayt have a special tie to the city of Medina, and they prefer the city of Medina to be by the grave of the Prophet than anything else. And it should be a lesson for us that we should be close to the Prophet as much as we can. In this 10-year period, the Imam continues to teach and educate society, whether they be in Sham, Medina, or anywhere, about the values of Ahlul Bayt and the true teachings of Islam. Famously, there are narrations that describe and say that Muawiyah would continue to blast and abuse the Ahlul Bayt from Sham, though he had taken the Khilafat. And people of Sham would be influenced by the preaching that Muawiyah would propagate against Ahlul Bayt. And they would come to Medina and they would be very harsh with the Ahlul Bayt. In one famous story, they describe and say that when Imam Hassan is sitting inside of the Masjid al-Nabawi, a man from Sham comes and he leans on the clothes of Imam Hassan so that Imam Hassan can't get up and walk away. And then he begins to insult and curse Imam Hassan, his father. He continues to abuse Imam Hassan because that's what Banu Umayyah had taught him in Sham. And he had come to Medina to see the Prophet and abuse these people. And Imam Hassan had no choice but to sit there and listen because the man was holding his clothes down so he couldn't stand up. When he finished, Imam Hassan famously turns to him and he says, I see that you're a traveler in this area. If you have any needs, come to us and we'll assist you. We'll give you our place to stay and we'll take care of your animals, and we'll make sure that you have food and resources provided in the city of Medina. Remember, there was no hotel, there were no Hiltons, no Marriotts that you could go to. So when you went to a foreign place, you had to find a place to stay, and it was difficult if you didn't know anybody. Imam Hassan's kindness and support to this man, in spite of his abuse, was one of the ways that people learned about the true character of Ahlul Bayt and true character of Islam, where many of the enemies would come back to the Ahlul Bayt and say to them, certainly Allah knows best where to put His authority on this earth, to describe and say that through your character we have understood what does it mean to be the authority of Allah on this earth, to be Hujjatullah on this earth. And they would step away from the misteachings of the Banu Umayyah. In this time frame is where we see that the Banu Umayyah propagated messages against the character of Imam Hassan, that they tried to assassinate his character so that people wouldn't look at him as a good person and would believe in the authority of the Banu Umayyah. And the counterpoint to that, the character of Imam Hassan was so powerful that anyone who met him from Sham, anyone who knew about him and heard these fallacies, would question the Khilafah and raise an opposition against the Khalifa. So much so that the Khalifa Muawiyah then is forced to assassinate Imam Hassan. Remember something, Imam Hassan is Shaheed at the age of 47, and he was younger than Muawiyah at this point in time, which is why the Shahadat of Imam Hassan has to be something that is unnatural. And it wasn't the first time that they attempted to assassinate Imam Hassan, but rather he had been attempted to be assassinated many times. Eventually, it's Muawiyah who takes a poison from the Romans and uses it. There is a personality who is known as Sir John in the court of Muawiyah, who is the ambassador of the Roman Caesars in the court of Muawiyah. And whether it's Sir John or somebody else, but Sir John is the oldest advisor of Muawiyah, and that it's a Roman poison that's sent. And Muawiyah, looking for a person to implement this poison, chooses Ju'da, the wife of Imam Hassan. And he offers her a great amount of wealth and to marry her to his son, who would be the Khalifa after him if Imam Hassan dies, according to Muawiyah, and says, poison Imam Hassan, I'll give you great wealth and I'll marry you to my son. And Ju'da poisons Imam Hassan. And this was a very severe poison, a very painful poison. And the Imam suffered for a period of, some say, 60 days under the effects of this poison that eventually turned his body green and that he would cough up his liver. And that Imam was killed by this poison eventually. And that the burial of the Imam was also something very difficult. That upon the Shahadat of Imam Hassan, it's narrated and said that he left in his wasiyah instruction that bury me next to my grandfather Rasulullah. But if they give you a hard time, don't fight them and bury me somewhere else. And in this situation, sure enough, that when Imam Hassan becomes shaheed from this poison, and they want to bury him next to Rasulullah, there are enemies who shoot arrows at the janazah to stop the Banu Hashim from burying Imam Hassan next to Rasulullah. And therefore, Imam Hassan's grave is made in Jannatul Baqi, where we go today to visit him. And that his assassination and his death before time was all due to the machinations of Muawiyah, who, upon successfully having the Imams assassinated, turns to Ju'da and says, I'll give you all the money I promised, but I love my son too much to marry him to one such as you. That you're someone who killed your own husband. Why would I risk my son's life by marrying him to you? And Ju'da too receives no success and no fulfillment of her desires of worldly gain through attacking the Ahlul Bayt. This short biography or description of these 30 years of the life of Imam Hassan, these 40 years of the life of Imam Hassan, really don't do the justice to the impact that Imam Hassan made in terms of character and teaching in society. But today, when we look at, for example, the character assassinations against Imam Hassan, whether that he's someone who is mitlaq, someone who divorces a lot, someone who, for example, na'uz billah, was a coward or was abusive in any sense, we know that these are all lies because they don't fit with the character and teaching of the Ahlul Bayt. And the impact of his social change that he brought through his role and authority was one of the lessons by which we can see the impact was so great that the enemies had to assassinate him, and the enemies also had to assassinate his character, lest that the grandson of Rasulullah be able to influence society just simply by his presence. One of the important lessons that we learn is through this example of Imam Hassan, that Changing society, bringing goodness to a community, is not reliant on authority. It's reliant on character and akhlaq and aqaid, to have a good philosophy of faith and to behave well with people. All of these elements are what cause a person to bring change into society. Don't assume that, for example, when I become the leader, when I become the president, when I become the authority, when it's mine, I will do right. If we don't have the practice of good character, we can't change anything for the better. If we don't have the good practice of piety, society will not follow us. And if we have piety, if we have good character, if we have knowledge, then even if we're not leaders in society, people will follow us and we will bring change into this world that is positive and makes the world a better place. We ask Allah again, by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadirin Ghaibin, ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. 10 times we call out, Ya Allah, 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 Ya Mahmud بحق محمد, Ya أعلى بحق علي, Ya فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة, Ya محسن بحق الحسن, Ya Qadim al-Ahsan bihaqq al-Hussain. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadah from us. Ya Allah, we have gathered here with hajat by the right of the mention of our Ahlul Bayt, by the right of Dua-e-Tawassul, by the right of this Tuesday. Oh Allah, fulfill our hajat. There are those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease. Oh Allah, give shafa and aman to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, this strife, this insecurity, this war, this oppression that's taking place in this world. Ya Allah, protect the mu'mineen, end the abuse, stop the tyrants, and protect all those who have faith and preserve your faith in this earth. O Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us, our families, from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of the Dhuhur of the Imam, where he brings justice and equity amongst the people as there is oppression and injustice in society. O Allah, make us from those who support and fight in this cause of justice. Make us amongst the supporters of justice. Make us the enemies of oppression. O Allah, hasten the reappearance of our Imam and make us his supporters in these difficult times. And most importantly, entitle us to the ziyarat of Imam Hussain in this world and the shafa of Imam Hussain in the hereafter. We ask again by ending with one Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas. لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم